Claim.
Well, whatever you want to call it.
Claim.
But I don't pretend to be the leader. And I thought the first thing to do would be, and let's see, there may be, there are a couple more, at least. Let me make an inventory. Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3. Well, I guess there's
Probably not.
Nat is not going to be, but Whit Beale said he would be here. So, and I see John Whitlock. I didn't know how that. How did you get word of this, John?
I invited John because he is an expert in calm, rational thinking and finding a just solution.
So you should know we have 7. I think maybe there'll be 8, be an 8th person, and we are all class of '64 except for one. We have. There he's holding up his hand. Joe Simons is class of '63, and we think that eventually it would be nice to have people from younger folks and some women and all. And we've talked to a couple people, but so far it's just this group. And this has sort of come about because the class of '64, I think, because I don't know how many classes are doing, but we've been, for about most of the COVID period, we've been having monthly meetings. Zoom on Zoom, and somehow we got talking about energy, and I had been haranguing them once every 5 years at our reunions to do something about climate, and hadn't made the headway that I'd hoped to. And then after sort of pounding away for the better part of a year, they've decided that maybe people wanted to get involved. So here we are. I think the first thing to do would be for us to go quickly around and just introduce ourselves to Andrew, so he knows who we are. So in no particular, should I call on people, or you just want to?
Yeah, why don't you call?
Okay, in the order on my screen. John, why don't you start?
Jonathan Coles. Yes, class of, yeah.
Where you are, where you live, and just
right now I'm in North Carolina. Usually live in North Florida. Spent most of my life in South America in Caracas. I have a granddaughter in school who knows you and admires you, Andrew. My granddaughter's name is Leonor. So we get we have a lot of interaction, and we've talked about these things with her, and we get a lot of feedback and information. So it's pretty cool. It's very active.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Carl.
Well, Carl Goodwin. I live in Maine, in South Bristol. Don't have much to say other than that. Lived around the country in various states, and I was born in Maine and was fortunate enough to get back here for maybe the end. We'll see.
Pleasure to meet you, Carl.
Joe Duane.
Hi, I'm Joe Duane. I'm in Pennsylvania right now at the home I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. I live in Bangkok, Thailand for most of the year. I'm class of '64. I went to Harvard and studied Chinese language and Chinese area studies. I went to law school at UC Berkeley and lived in California for 17 years. Became finally a Silicon Valley corporate lawyer and moved to Singapore. I spent much of my life living in Asia, and that's where I studied. So that's a quick capsule.
Very cool. Thank you, Joe.
And the other Joe Simons.
Hi, Joe Simons here. I'm living on Orcas Island, which is off the west coast of Washington State. I'm the one who kind of started this whole thing in 2013 when I came to the only reunion that I've ever gone to at Exeter, my 50th, and the condition of my coming was that I wanted to be able to give a presentation to as many people as showed up on climate disruption and what was this school doing about it. And that triggered a whole group of class of '63 people who have largely faded off, although it's very possible, given this resurgence, that many of them could come back. And so basically Conrad and I seem to be the only ones who were holding the fort on this topic until just fairly recently, when more members of the class of '64 joined. But yes, we're really hoping to reach out to all the classes and particularly the faculty, and ultimately we would like to get administration into this. And there is a stacked level of concepts about how this initiative, because Exeter really is a leadership incubator, how that can become viral and go not only to all the other prep schools or high quality high schools in the nation, or perhaps the world, but also bounce up to the college and university level, so that this becomes a really significant international transformation. It's kind of like taking a Greta Thunberg's blood sample and distributing it around the world.
Wow, Joe, I like that. I like that analogy. Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you and hear what you have to say.
John Whitlock.
I'm a lawyer in Boston, class of 64. I continue to practice law, having been practicing here in Boston for my entire career. And I'd be interested in how the current environmental projects at Exeter can be expanded to encompass a broader outreach. I do understand that there are some things going on, and I'd like to know more about that, in addition to how we can encourage an expansion of that process.
Yeah, certainly.
And Peter?
Yes. Well, contrary to appearances, I actually do not have a Harkness table in my living room, even though I would like very much to. I have much in common with Joe Duane. I went from Exeter and studied Chinese studies at Harvard as well. And it's interesting that China has 16 of the 23 most polluted cities in the world. So there's something to think about directly about the climate. I think that we need to develop much more the capacity for leadership training at Exeter than is already the case. I think that the environmental crisis is only one of at least 3 crises that we've talked about in our class of 64 focus group Zooms. One of them is the private sector, surveillance capitalism. And we're looking even today at the accusations against Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, the misuse of information to foment January 6th, to invade our private lives and so on. So Exeter graduates are the ones who are going to be dealing with that also. Another is the whole issue of governance in Washington. I think I'm living in Canada now, and it's appalling to look at what's happening in Washington and seeing the lack of ethics and transcendence. And I think that's another element that we want to put into this program, which we hope will be able to work out with you, a sort of new course or series of courses that will bring all the elements together of leadership that we need to solve all of these crises. So to follow up on what John said, I'd be interested in who among all these actors is going to, are the 2 or 3 people in each category that could help us forge a consensus. Obviously you, as a professor and the leader of the environmental movement or program at Exeter are one, but who are the other professors, 2 or 3, interdisciplinary, that we could bring into this discussion? Who among the students are going to be leaders? We've heard the name of a mysterious Ophelia, and she might be in this environmental action club. We don't know. We need to know who that or those students are. Who among the alumni, other than ourselves, are interested? And what about the trustees? Are the trustees going to be for change or against change? So I'm looking at today as the opening of a discussion of all of the actors that we can bring to bear on a very simple goal. And this was the one that was formulated by Joe Duane. It's just to see if we can, between now and the fall of 2022, put together a course, an interdisciplinary, multi-valued course on environmental leadership. So that's where I'm coming from.
And Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah, I'll introduce myself. Sorry. I'm Andrew McDamony. This is actually my 10th year teaching at Exeter, but I'm a graduate of the school from class of 2004. After that, I went to studied chemistry at Johns Hopkins and got my master's degree in organic and chemical biology from Stanford University. And this is my second year as a sustainability education coordinator. But like all of you, deeply passionate and committed to doing what I can to help students and our school really recognize our impact and our influence on the climate, both as leaders and like the global climate as well. So it's really exciting for me to have the opportunity to talk with you all. And I hope that this is just the first of many in a series of conversations that we have. And hopefully it gets bigger, as we get more people and constituents to join what we're thinking about.
Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. I guess, I mean, you all know me. I guess the most dissonant fact that you can know about me was that I was a French teacher in my professional career, having nothing to do with climate change. But I had to go into the military after college and 1 year teaching before I couldn't stay out. And right when I got out, I read in the summer of 1972. I read *The Limits to Growth*, which which got me started on this path. And we'll talk more about things like that later. So I assume you've had a chance to read what we called our statement of purpose. And, I mean, essentially that's our, we wanted to get something, in a fairly compact but informative package that we could send to you. So that's going on. When you can see what I'd like to focus on today is the the curriculum paragraph, the longest paragraph of that statement is, what we think would be a reasonable goal to discuss. And I don't know if you have any reactions you want to share. How do we move into a discussion about that? Because that's what I hope that we can.
So as I was reading this, one of the things that struck me was just the cohesiveness of the vision that you all have. Because a lot of what we have on campus right now is, spread and sprinkled across multiple disciplines taught by different teachers. And there's a real lack of continuity of experience and what you are thinking about in creating or proposing this course is to really make sure that we touch more levels than we do at the moment. So I just wanted to, as we speak about curriculum, one of the big things that I've been interested in as a teacher is just what the school currently offers in terms of courses. And so in the email that I received, you listed a number of courses. But one of the things that's happened over the past few years as our school has really thought deeply about systemic racism and social justice is teachers are actually within some of the core courses taking the opportunity to really touch on some of the things that you guys see as valuable. And so, for example, I just wanted to bring up two things that aren't listed. The first one would be in the intro bio course. So this is for all students that take either bio 200 or bio 300. So they would be preps or uppers. They all read, they talk a lot about consumption and materialism, and they read Hope Yarn's The Story of More, as well as excerpts from Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. So there's like, but I think the point I'm trying to make here is that even though it's not necessarily all concentrated within a particular course, there is some exposure. The second thing is we do go over systems thinking and some of the concepts of global cycles in terms of climate change and feedback loops as well, positive, negative feedbacks. And so that happens in spring term of physics, where they get that opportunity to learn a bit about some of the feedback loops that are taking place. But I think what if I'm understanding you correctly, is A, that doesn't reach every student, and B, that doesn't necessarily cover the other sorts of topics that you're interested in. But I did want to make sure that you guys are aware that the curriculum has started to shift from, centripetal force to global feedback systems.
I think the one of the key aspects of what we're proposing is that it be a full year course, as opposed to something that just is an elective in one part of the course, because I think that can just take more. And I think it's the thing, to my mind, the thing that is in a sense most critical is the last sentence of that paragraph about curriculum. It says that we need to look at the spiritual I forget how we phrased it, but the notion that climate change is really not, ultimately it's not a technical problem. It's a problem with how we think of our role in the world, how humans in a misguided way, I think, have been on the wrong path for a long time. And somehow that has to be.
I would use the word mythological.
Yeah, I mean, there's a. So anyway, it's just that is, I think, I mean, and guess what? From my mind, what we're proposing is something that we feel has a chance at being making a measurable, significant difference in what we're doing. This is a tough problem. We're not expecting. I mean, climate change. I think of as not even a problem. It's a predicament. It's well advanced already around the world, and the notion that, I mean, there's not a switch to turn it off. There's no way to sort of bring it back to anything that we're used to. So we have to find a way to ameliorate what's left and have some sort of outcome that allows civilization to go on.
From an educational point of view, if the idea is to help students become leaders, they have to understand the source and the scope of the problem, looking at it from a societal issue, from an issue of economics, that is, who benefits from the current system, from an issue of governance, how is governance possibly a solution, or how can it be controlled? What are the private initiatives that can be initiated by individuals or by groups, whether they are social groups or corporate groups? So there, you could imagine a structured course that brings in elements of history and religion, physics, and other sciences, government affairs, sociology. I mean, it would be the kind of course that draws upon the knowledge or learning from other courses. I don't know whether this course would have to have a bunch of prerequisites. I would hope that it could be more of an introduction as much as anything else, because I'd like to get people started to think about these things earlier, rather than giving this to a senior after they've had a bunch of other courses, and then have them begin to think systematically at the end. But again, those are pedagogical questions that you teachers are probably better at analyzing than those of us who are not professional teachers. But the concept I think that we're trying to get at is someone who can integrate these things and see ways in which different solutions can be achieved, and then figure out which of those solutions they could help pursue. I'm sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to interrupt what you were going to say.
Joe, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I think the notion we've had so far is that this would be basically an introductory course, but if the goal is to produce leaders to take action against the effects of climate disruption, a leader needs to understand some basic science, starting with physics, the applicable physics, applicable chemistry, biochemistry, and the dynamics of climate itself, as well as the contributors, the causes to climate disruption, energy and power, They're laid out in the paragraph there. Is what we see the spectrum. We're not trying to micromanage what this course would finally be, but the idea is to create that spectrum, starting on the physics side, looking then at the economic, political, social side, and as well going into the mythological, psychological, spiritual, philosophical aspect of man's relation to nature. So and this course would be available as broadly as possible. And then in future years, that course would continue to be offered, and shorter, more focused courses would also be available, focusing on the physics, focusing on the climate dynamics, focusing on the philosophical aspects, but always with the intent of enabling students to become actors, leaders, and drive change as they go, as they leave Exeter and go on to college and go on from there. They are the ones who are going to have to live with this. You know, most of us don't expect to be around at 2050, but they are going to be around. And the idea is to start now to give them tools that they're going to need to save this planet.
Okay, I see you probably have all noticed that we've been joined by one more member of our class. We've all introduced ourselves, Whit, but you didn't get a chance to. So do you want to just quickly tell, and you'll see that Andrew is here. I guess you picked him out, but please introduce yourself in a few sentences.
Here I am, Andrew, a member of the August class of 1964. I went on to a degree in economics at Harvard, and then to a Master of Forest Science degree at Yale. And I've worked in the environmental field, mostly in protecting forest land for NGOs for my entire career. I retired 2 years ago, but I'm still very active on a bunch of boards and advisory committees in New England. I'm New England based. So anyway, here I am, and I'm very sorry to join late. I just couldn't find the link. My computer ate the email or something. Anyway.
Well, he probably used it for fishing bait. He's in Canada.
I know. I'm in New Brunswick, Canada, but
I'd like to add
with my.
Yeah. Joe Simons has something to add.
I'd just like to add something to what Joe said. To me is a fun, and this may be my opinion, but I think we all might share it, that this climate disruption issue is a symptom of a disease. It is not the disease. And the question then is, what is the disease? And if it's called industrial capitalism, well, that's probably not the cause. That itself is a symptom. And so how far back do we go till we find out what is really the root cause of all of these symptoms, these layers of symptoms that have emerged now as, oh my God, how did that happen? Well, we need to unpack that because clearly we're going in the wrong direction.
Before we go further, I just wanted, I forgot to check with Andrew. How much time do you have today?
I have another meeting at 3.
At 3, so we had basically an hour. So we just need to focus on that. And I guess I hope that by the time you have to leave, we can get some sort of a preliminary idea on, is it realistic to design a course, a full year course in the year before it starts, and how many people get involved, and there's just some mechanics of how realistic it is to try to continue to advocate and give support. So we'll talk about that before you go.
Okay.
Yeah, Peter.
I just want to point to what I see as the causes, the actual disease itself. It's a lack of true wisdom and true ethics. We see this in Washington today. We see this in the January 6th rebellion. We have knowledge without goodness. In the Exeter Founding Charter, one of the key 5 principles is knowledge with goodness. And what we need to do to create the leadership that we need to tackle all these crises, because they all stem from the same disease, is to somehow introduce ethics into this course. And I'm just wondering, there's an ethics student group at Exeter. Can they be involved somehow in making this interdisciplinary thing include spirituality instead of just sort of tagging it on?
Well, I've okay. Do you want to answer that, Peter? I mean,
So
Andrew.
yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not gonna, I can't possibly answer anything at this moment.
Yeah.
But one of the, as you spoke, Peter, one of the things that you really resonated with me was your use of, you know, our, so it's kind of our documents that we constantly refer to at Exeter, you know, academic excellence, non-civic. And so one of the things our school has embarked upon this year is what's called the Core Value Project. That is started through the office, by the Director of Equity and Inclusion on campus. And that is a 4-year program that occurs once a week on where students really and teachers have the opportunity to work together and collaborate and take ideas and create a project out of that that they then bring and can return to the community. So the idea is that the students do a lot of work with the teacher, facilitates it, and all of that is returned to the community via presentations, classes, things like that. So that is one avenue in addition to what I see as a possibility as a course. I only mention it because it's called the Core Values Project, and you just mentioned one of the school's like founding core values. So,
Yeah, good. Well, I will just say, I mean, to add something more to what to the question Joe asked, what is the fundamental disease? I tend to go much farther back in history, and I think that one of the things that we have to overcome is the notion that developed right along with civilization, cities and things, when we stopped being hunter-gatherers and began to be what became modern man, is that we until that point, I think most humans had a sense of some sort of connection with nature, reverence for nature, a sense of the sacredness of nature in a lot of cultures. And we very quickly, civilized people, got the notion that they were not part of nature, separate from nature, independent, intended to dominate and control and use nature, use things for our own, whatever we think is we need. And I think that's gotten us into a lot of trouble. So we need to return. And I think that the fact that that grading sweetgrass is something that is a source of for some teaching is excellent, because that constantly reinforces the notion of connection to nature in a very powerful way, I think. And we just need to make it quite explicit that that needs to be kept in mind.
I really liked what Andrew said about this core values project, because it goes right to the heart of the missions, the fundamental missions at Exeter, and it already has a leadership component. It has projects, it has things that have to result from that, which I think that's just what we're looking. We're looking for things that are action oriented. So if we can tie that together with the whole idea that Joe explained so well about the introductory, some kind of an introductory holistic course offering, or that would kind of be a good underpinning for those things, that would really do the trick. The question would be, okay, how would we go about something that basic, in generating ideas towards that?
So I'm trying to understand, are you saying more along the lines of making sure that we establish that foundation first, of that the students understand the physics and the chemistry and the systems approach, and then moving into like adding the values in terms of the ethics. Is that my understanding correctly? Is that what you said?
Well, not necessarily.
The actual,
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
you know, the actual details of the curriculum would be finally up to the teacher who's going to carry it forward. At this point, we're just suggesting what that gamut is. And so if someone is to be able to lead others in action to address climate disruption, they have to have some familiarity with the physics and chemistry and the science that they're talking about. You can have, as I said, courses later on in future years that focus in much more detail on the science side of it, or on the political economic side of it, social side of it, and as well really just focus on this psychological, whatever you want to call it, side of it, man's relation to nature. But for this course, the idea is to have that that full spectrum included. In what sequence or is would be up to the person who's going to carry that forward.
Well, Andrew mentioned at the beginning that there was a shift in focus towards more systemic thinking and tying together different disciplines. I don't know at what stage that comes in and at what stage it is tied to kind of developing leadership skills, but that's the sort of thing I think we're looking for. Something that early on, there's no better example than this one that ties, everything is tied to climate disruption. I mean, it affects everything. So I think whatever we have that already there that we can strengthen and get in as early as possible, I think fits the bill.
I'd like to jump in and just question the word introductory. We have seniors who are going to be the first generation to be asked to lead. I think it would be a shame for this course not to be opened, to be only offered to preps and lowers, for example. And I think that, I would see it as a really general course where, as Joe says, the sort of nucleus of these various sciences is explained in a way that's accessible to all students. And we could at least grandfather in the seniors and the uppers so that they too could benefit from this leadership initiative. I would hesitate to ask that they have already bases in so many disciplines. I think a true leader, by the way, is one who is able to identify and call on the experts when they're necessary. So I would see this as a course open to basically everybody in any year.
Yeah, and I guess
another way to look at it would be, you could design a course that's geared to the preps and lowers who haven't had as much of the history, science, and so on. And you could design a follow-on course that is designed for upperclassmen that focuses on those things and the action items, the things that, what can an individual do? Is it through I think the thing we want to avoid is making people so aware of the problem that they're paralyzed in how to address it. Rather, what we're looking for is leaders who will figure out ways to address it. And one way to do that is to have a course that says, these are 6 or 7 ways in which this kind of problem can be addressed. Here are some ideas. And have the Harkness table discuss ideas about how to address it. To me, that would be the kind of invigorating discussion that might in fact lead to some leadership going forward. So it would be both a knowledge increase and a result-oriented goal-setting course. And again, pedagogically, this may end up being multiple courses at different levels. Or it may end up, being an introductory course where these topics are introduced, and then after some years of further study, kind of a further goal-setting course. Again, these are pedagogical issues that you guys could probably teach us about. But I think the goal here is not just knowledge, but knowledge coupled with a desire to do something about it based upon the non-civi and the societal benefit, the societal responsibility that Exeter teaches.
But well, thank you. And I just would remind everyone that the fifth paragraph in our statement of purpose is introduced with the word urgency, and I think it's important to recognize that the reason that's important. We don't have as much time to. I mean, Exeter has a tradition, I think, of studying things long and hard before they make any changes, and we don't have a lot of time. The world doesn't have a lot of time to wait to start doing the right thing. So that's unfortunate, but that's the truth. Joe Simons.
I'd like to ask a question if I can.
Okay, sure, Carl. Go ahead.
I should have maybe said up front that I'm a businessman. That's my career, particularly in operations and automation, as a matter of fact. So just historically, how has Exeter come to have a new course? What are the mechanics of development?
Now.
Yeah. Gosh, let's see. So there are a couple of avenues in terms of course creation. The first one is a teacher goes and proposes like, hey, I would like to add this particular course to the courses of instruction. It typically would fall under an elective. So for example, I created an elective about material science a few years back, and we studied just modern materials. It was a course about modern materials, and that got approved by the full faculty. That's one way that a new course can be created. And that typically falls under the traditional format of the course meets 4 times a week for 1 term. So that's in essence what that would look like. Another avenue is Exeter has an integrated studies department. And one of the aspects of that is called Exeter Initiatives. And Exeter Initiatives gives a little bit more free reign in terms of how you structure a course. And so it doesn't necessarily have to subscribe to this course meets 4 times a week, 50 minutes of homework a night for 1 term. There are courses that are able to meet for double blocks. There are courses that are able to meet all year long, right? So it's something that starts in the fall and then you finish it in the spring. And so there's a little bit more leeway in how the course itself is structured. I think the idea was to provide faculty and students an opportunity to think outside of the box in terms of what a traditional academic experience would look like. And so I know that there's a course that has been proposed where Spanish-speaking students, a Spanish course, but one of the things that they do is go on field trips to places like Lowell, and they do community service with Spanish-speaking communities. So those are the 2 ways that I can think of right now of how new courses are proposed.
Just a quick question to cut in. Are there also student-initiated courses? Have students actually proposed and led courses?
So, okay, thank you for bringing that up. That's a great question. There are 2 additional things that students so that's faculty driven. There are ways that students can create courses. The first one would be a senior project, which is an independent study for a senior or a group of seniors who wants to do something of particular interest for them. And so that has been anything from building a tiny house to studying about cancer to I'd have to look at some of my notes from previous ones. The other way is that they can do what's called a field course or a 999. And so if this particular course, that's usually for advanced students who, like, let's say you're advanced in mathematics and you've exhausted, you finished calculus and you want to study differential equations. You would create a 999 where you would find a faculty advisor and you would work together outside curriculum. It still gets credit and it goes on the transcript as a field course, but it is not offered in the course catalog under the name like differential equations.
Yeah, I think it's two things. I mean, we're now at, it's about 15 minutes left, so I want to be sure we respect your need to leave and get done what we need to get done before then. But I think we're interested in a course that as many students as possible could take. I mean, not just a small handful of students, but a full class size anyway. So that would be my sense that we I suppose it's, and I guess before we, a question that should be sort of, I like to have an answer to before this ends is, where, given the discussion we've had so far today and the interest in developing a course that addresses these sort of broad sweep of things, what are the next steps that we should consider when we meet again? How should we proceed? So we should sort of have a vision of that and an agreement. Whit, do you have something to say?
Andrew, let me just tell you briefly experience I had when I went to graduate school, which began in the fall of 1968. I went to school thinking I would get involved in industrial forest management, perhaps on an international basis, have a, I learned languages pretty easily. But in the fall of 68, the Yale School of Forestry decided that there was an environmental crisis out there, and it had invited a whole series of people to come in and talk about it. And it wasn't a course, it was, I think they were presentations that occurred probably once a month, maybe a little more often than that. And some really, really interesting people came in. This is before the Clean Air Act, before the Clean Water Act. And so it was right on the cusp of all the environmental laws and recognition that there were huge issues out there. I actually had a professor of let's see, he was an ecology professor named Herbert Borman, who was one of the original investigators at Hubbard Brook Experimental Station. He was telling us back then that the buildup of CO2 in the atmosphere was going to cause big problems. So my thinking goes to maybe people coming in and addressing the whole student body and giving those kinds of presentations. And from that, there would be a course where the youngsters could dig in a whole lot deeper. So just my 2 cents here. And I changed careers as a result of that series of presentations.
Yeah, that really speaks to me, simply because I think that one of the limitations, one of the challenging aspects of creating a new course is just the inherent limitation of how many kids you get to interact with. So for instance, for the course that I taught, I proposed it, and therefore I could have 2 sections, which meant I taught 26 kids. And so out of a school of 1,000, now we're talking about 2.6% of the student body is getting that kind of exposure. And hopefully, you find a diamond among those 26 kids that can make a transformational leadership change. But having the opportunity to address the whole student body is something that I think about regularly. And I'm fascinated at the idea of like a symposium and trying to create a course around that kind of year-long symposium would be a very interesting avenue.
Is there anything like that going on now?
The only thing that we have right now is our assembly program where we have speakers, but you guys
not
probably
coordinated. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a coordinated systemic, not a coordinated curricular.
Right.
Are any of the speakers in the assemblies students? In other words, if we had this course that Joe has helped us to conceptualize and that to develop their leadership skills, each student in the course would actually be responsible for contributing a piece of this environmental puzzle during the morning assembly. Is there anything like that that is going on, or is there anything against that sort of thing happening?
We don't have students typically give assemblies in the sense of like where they stand up in the assembly hall and give a presentation. One of the things that we do have, which is on a little bit of a smaller scale, is called the TEDx Club, where students actually basically give a TED Talk, and there's a forum, I think in the spring term, where they give their presentations to a larger portion of students, not just, it's open to the community. So that is something that has, I think the first one was 2 years ago.
I got a question. How's the Academy dealing with COVID? I'm assuming that it's people just gathering classes like when we did. So one of the questions that strikes me is in terms of reaching a larger audience, much larger audience, is whether or not one of these courses, the course we're talking about as opening, could be recorded. And then the question is there any restriction on the distribution of that recording? Could it go outside the academy? Could it go to the alumni? Could it go to the world? So that this course that only goes to 13 kids or 26 kids, or I don't know, something pretty insignificant, might be able to be leveraged. For example, the Yale University's most popular course is on happiness.
Yep.
Right? So I think marketing here is a factor, but also distribution. And I think something like this is so important that if it could be recorded somehow, which I don't think would be hard considering the technical capabilities that exist today, this could really be a way for Exeter to kind of polish its brand, among other things, as well as reach a lot of people.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a lot in that. First of all, so right now the campus, in terms of COVID, we've actually learned a lot about how to put ourselves online and not necessarily market, but give our presentations to a larger group of people. So like one of the things that was really problematic for us last year was we had so many students in different time zones, and how did you then, if a student, it's 2 a.m. their time when you're teaching, make sure that they had access to that information. So we started to develop a little bit broader skill set in sort of disseminating our classes and materials. And I don't think that there is any legal or any issue with us putting things online related to our classes, in the sense like, the Yale happiness class, like having an online course. I think that would just take time to develop, but there is precedent for that. So for example, the 9th grade program, they created a study skills course where students gave feedback, and not feedback, but they gave just little lessons on how to be an Exeter student, like what sorts of habits, like how to annotate a book. And so that's actually online now for all students to have access to as they enter the 9th grade. And that was done by our 9th grade program coordinator. And so there are now new avenues that people are exploring. And one of the things that you just gave me think about is, I think Harvard has kind of these hybrid courses for the general education, where anyone, if you go to a school at Harvard, it can take a particular class. Like if you go to the medical school, you can actually sign up for a climate change course that's taught entirely online and has a much broader reach than just like an in-person student. So my mind immediately went there as you spoke to that as a way of, kind of solving our, or thinking about our impact problem, getting the largest crater possible.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'd like to ask Andrew, in the time we have left, what is your immediate reaction to this last hour? Can you envisage this happening? Can you see a course like this on the curriculum a year from now? Are you excited about this? Can you see other faculty members becoming excited about this and wanting to make this happen?
I definitely,
and push.
no, go ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
No,
Go ahead.
I'm really.
I think you-
I'd like to get your reaction because we can't do, we can do what we're doing, and we can continue and do a lot more, but it's going to in the end depend on key faculty members with and I think support from students as well as support from us alumni, but without it being driven by a dedicated faculty member with passion who believes in this and is dedicated to make it happen, I think it'll be very difficult to make it happen.
Well, I mean, so there are multiple things at play with this particular idea. And so the first one is there are there embers that we can sort of ignite and get the fire going? And the answer, I think, on this campus is yes. I do think that there is a very large, committed group of teachers and students who would love to see this sort of idea take off. That's the first one. So I think that it would just be about getting those people together, students, faculty, and other constituents like alums, together to discuss this and brainstorm. The second thing is, are there like structures in place that allow us to be successful in this endeavor? Like, is there an avenue for us to create this and have kids sign up for it and have kids have access to it? And the answer to that, I think, is also yes. In terms of like with online, with the Exeter Innovations course. So I think that there is a way to do this. And then the third one are, do we have scissors for some of the restraints that might hold this back? In terms of like time, commitment, and you guys spoke to the difficulty of getting, Exeter is a very deliberative body. And having the opportunity to like maybe bypass some of those things. And I think that part is a little bit trickier, but I definitely think it's doable with enough groundswell, because I do think that there are administrators and there are people on campus and trustees that would be interested in actually being a leader in this. So I do see it as a possibility, but I certainly don't see it as like an easy task.
well, no.
But anything worth doing is necessarily difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have 5 minutes left. I'd like to get an agreement on. Can we talk about another meeting, or what happens after this, and we will have probably within 24 hours a recording, the recording of this meeting that could be made available to show to other people on the campus if that would be helpful at all. But I can send that around. But what do you think about how do we continue? What's next?
Yeah. Okay. So after this meeting, I will be meeting with students who are environmental leaders on campus. So, for example, the Environmental Action Committee, the Exeter Climate Lobby, and e-proctors.
E-proctors, yeah.
Yep, and as well as, I think there's another one, the Sunrise Club. So we're starting each week. We meet to go over what our plans are for the term, and hopefully from that I can maybe get a list of interested students and to start thinking about what this would look like, and we can start that brainstorming process and start to recommit. I think it would be beneficial to share some of the notes as well as the recording with some of the interested faculty members to get their opinions on what this could look like. And then I think ultimately getting it to a broader group of adults is going to be especially important for having this be a successful enterprise.
Okay. Well, I will see that you get a copy of the recording as soon as we have it available. And can you commit to another meeting time, like in a week from now, or at some point in the future? What's the?
I think I can certainly commit. Afternoons tend to be best for me. Maybe we should think about either next week or in 2 weeks' time. Because now that the students are involved with classes a lot more, things don't always get done as quickly as maybe if I were doing them.
Right. Well, I think we're all relatively available within whenever you know, we can certainly get a group together, I think. So is there a time that you would like to suggest?
Afternoons work best for me. So,
But I mean, a day and a particular day?
Tuesdays are fine.
Okay.
I would like to ask, I mean, my sort of dream for the next meeting would be to have, in addition to Andrew, your wonderful and very, very informative, other faculty and at least one or two students. So it might be helpful to think of a time, maybe on the weekend, or when a few more people could join us to represent the other elements at Exeter who ultimately will put the course in place.
That's a fantastic idea. Sure.
If not in the next meeting, but we can certainly try to make that happen as soon as possible. But you know, that might take a little more time. So,
well, I was thinking about 10 days, maybe Saturday, not this Saturday, but the next one might give Andrew enough time to invite those people and to strike while the iron is hot.
Cool. Okay.
Is that possible, Andrew, you think?
Let's see, 10 days from now would be the...
You're thinking about the Saturday, whatever that would be.
That would be the 21st. That's actually the one weekend I'm not available.
Oh, okay.
But the Wednesday afternoons sometimes tend to be free for faculty and students.
Good.
There are blocks during our schedule where people are free. And so I'll start to see if I can find now we're getting into tricky, like finding common times.
Right.
But it might have to be on a weekend, like you said. So if it's not the 21st, then maybe we could do the 28th. I know that's starting to project farther out, but I want that conversation. It doesn't have to be the next conversation, but maybe we could schedule the 28th as our group meeting for larger constituencies.
And you mentioned Wednesday, and that reminded me that one of the very active members of the ESI group when we started up, 7 years ago, was Sue Kaplan from the class of '79. She's currently teaching a class at UNH on Tuesdays and Thursdays afternoons, but Wednesday would be a day that she could join us, and she would love to. So,
let's set up for next one. Let's set up a meeting for next Wednesday. Let's set up a meeting for next Wednesday.
Let's do that.
And if you can find any other faculty or students, that'd be great. Otherwise, our group can just continue on.
2 o'clock time frame. Is that good for you, Andrew?
Andrew?
So 2 o'clock next Wednesday.
That will be the 13th. Andrew, the subsequent Saturday is actually the 16th, not the 21st. So if that makes a difference.
It does. I'm free on the 16th, but not the 22nd or whatever that is.
Yeah, the 23rd. Okay.
Well, we have some flexibility in our time. If you can find a time that works for a critical mass of students and other professors, we would find a way to join you on those times. So we would invite you. We'll set this time for now, but maybe there's a different time that works better for people at your end.
Sounds great.
I think an important question is if there's anything that you think we should be doing in the meantime, or should we just wait till we have that next meeting?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd have to give that some thought.
Yeah.
Email would work. If you have an idea, you could send you have a bunch of email addresses,
and likewise for you guys, if you have things that you think that we didn't touch upon that you would like me to, in my communication with additional students and faculty, you have my email now, and I would love and welcome all communication.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. I don't want to keep you any longer. We're now a couple minutes after 3 o'clock, so I don't want to monopolize your time. But
I thank you for organizing this. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I really appreciate it, and I think that we have the rumblings of a really large idea. So this is really cool.
Good.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Goodbye. Bye.
Well,
So, but before we all disperse, I didn't want to take the time to say it, but I remember almost like it happened yesterday, the presentation done by an author, and I believe he might have been a physician as well, a fellow named Harry Caudle, Caudill, I think, whose best known title was Night Comes to the Cumberland. And he lived and worked in the Southern Appalachian coal country. And, you know, I think most of the world didn't really know what those coal companies were doing, turning the countryside upside down, poisoning their workers.
Mm-hmm.
So his presentation touched on many, many things that are, you know, still relevant today. You know, big business, absolute not caring about the individual, poor health, or you know, non-existent health, you know, healthcare. And
This was
you
a
know,
presentation at Yale, Whit.
yes,
At Yale.
in the fall of it was either the fall of '68 or the spring of '69. It was extraordinary, and you know, just people dirt poor getting taken advantage of by, you know, Big Brother. Tennessee and Ernie Ford's song, right?
16 tons.
16 tons. Yeah.
Right.
16 tons.
Number
And
nine.
you know, these poor workers just dying of silicosis, which was called black lung disease. I mean, it was amazing. Man, whoa, it was a mind-opening experience. And there are certainly similar corporations you know, somebody could make a presentation about, you know, today.
Well, I think we should focus on probably explore as long as we can the notion of a full year course, what we propose, and see if that's a realistic goal for this next year. But then, I mean, you know, the idea of having a symposium kind of course where people come in over the course of a year, that's appealing too. And certainly one of the names that, when you were talking about that, I'm pretty sure that we could get Richard Heinberg for one of those.
Sure.
But anyway.
Great. Okay.
I would hope that one thing that would come out of this course would be creating, in fact, what the course is about, you know, climate action leadership, and so that the students who graduated or I mean, finished the course, or even during the course, would start proselytizing to other students, so that this thing started becoming a thing, a meme, some sort of a new wedge in the door.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, you know,
I'd like to say with respect to that the best way to develop leadership is through action. So that a seminar course is great, but we have to also structure this course so that there is activity, that the students go out and do something and learn and grow through that. Now, I have no idea what that could be, but I really like the CAL idea, you know, the climate action leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we could talk about in the next meeting as well.
Well, and I would just say, it feels to me as if anything, there's even more momentum after this meeting than there was before. I mean, I think he's Andrew's things are percolating with him, and he, you know, we'll see. But I think we're on track for moving forward.
I agree.
Yes.
I really agree.
Yeah.
Thank you, Conrad. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to all of you, and we'll stay in touch. And
right, and I will be processing this video and putting it up on YouTube, and then sending you the link as soon as I can, hopefully by this evening.
Thank you.
good,
Thank you.
great. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
So long.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.